Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 135, Tanks a Lot. The episode begins with Ash and the gang, along with Pikachu and Togepi, sleeping under a tree in a random-ass valley, having decided to take a nearby rest. However, as they slept, they were being spied on by a mysterious Pokemon eating a fruit, who proceeded to return to other Pokemon of its same species and tell them about what it had saw, eating more fruit in the process. Meanwhile, this Pokemon wasn't the only thing that was spying on Ash and the gang, but so were Team Rocket, as usual, inside their new tank, which they had called the Arbo tank, since it looked exactly like an Arbok. Jessie spots that Ash and the gang were currently asleep, and suggests that they go up to them in the tank and steal Pikachu, but Meowth mentions that if they drove up in this loud-ass tank, then that would simply wake Ash and the gang up, so they then come up with the idea to sneak out of the tank and grab Pikachu, and then return to the tank and use it to make their getaway. Meanwhile, back at where Ash and the gang were sleeping, the Pokemon had returned, being curious as to what Togepi was, and wanting to find out, so it dropped its apple to the ground in order to try and pick Togepi up and put it in its hands. However, the Pokemon accidentally drops Togepi, sending it rolling down a hill. The commotion caused Togepi to wake up, and being the kind little Pokemon that it was, it instantly made friends with the new Pokemon, and they started to play together. They got a little too carried away playing, though, and ended up rolling off of a cliff directly into Team Rocket's Arbo tank, as its hatch was left open. Team Rocket hears the ruckus that this caused, and runs to the source of the noise, being the Arbo tank control room, as that's where the hatch led. They spot Togepi and the Pokemon playing around with the tank's controls, and when Togepi steps on a lever, it causes the tank to speed off, leaving Team Rocket behind outside, as when they spotted Togepi and the Pokemon, they only spotted them from outside the tank and looking through the tank's window. They weren't actually inside the tank, so they angrily rush off, trying to catch up. Meanwhile, Misty had woken up at this point and immediately realized that her Togepi was gone. Before she could wake up the others to alert them, a Pokemon had already done so to Ash, by annoyingly tapping on his head. He at first assumes it was Pikachu tapping him, but when he spots the Pokemon, he immediately pulls out his Pokedex to learn what it was, and it reveals that its name was Sentret, a Pokemon that can use its high-pitched voice to sound warnings of danger. Misty instantly accuses this Sentret of potentially being involved with Togepi's disappearance, or at least knowing where it went off to. And right as she said this, the Sentret tried to tell them something. Brock suggests that the Sentret may have been trying to find something, and he was correct, as this Sentret was the mother of the one that had ran off with Togepi earlier, and it was looking for its young. Ash and the gang didn't know this, though, and it certainly didn't have any more time to speculate, as they then saw a crash in the distance and ran off to go investigate. Unbeknownst to them, the crash was the Arbo tank crashing into some rocks, attempting to break through them because it couldn't continue forward otherwise, since no one was actually driving it, unless of course you counted Togepi and the Sentret. The Arbo tank eventually encounters a group of Sentret in the area, a different one than the one from earlier in the episode, and they try and stop the tank in its tracks. However, the tank simply continues forward, and it scares them away, thankfully not running them over. Meanwhile, Team Rocket, who were still following the tank, were absolutely furious at this point, as they saw the damage that it was taking by running into the rocks, because they had spent a lot of money to be able to afford it. They fantasized about all the different shit that they could have spent that money on, such as a whole bunch of food, or some cat food for Meowth, or a new coin for Meowth, or some caviar and a fancy dinner for Jessie. Team Rocket's fantasies are interrupted as Ash and the gang run up to them, as they were also looking for the source of the crash, as you can remember. And Ash questions Team Rocket why the tank was driving by itself, and just what it was in general. Team Rocket revealed that it was theirs, but that Togepi and Sentret were currently inside driving it, and that's why it was going absolutely fucking haywire. Ash and the gang and Team Rocket then stopped chasing the Arbo tank to momentarily discuss if they should have a truce so that they could catch the tank together. However, Ash and the gang decide against this, as Brock sends out his Onix and has him, Sentret, Ash, and Misty all ride on it so that they could catch up to the tank faster, leaving Team Rocket in the dust. Meanwhile, inside the Arbo tank, Togepi and the Sentret were still messing around with the controls, and in the process, this resulted in 2 mechanical fists being activated, which fly out of the tank and punch through some nearby rocks. Man, if only they were able to keep the fists, then they could actually break through every rock. Anyways, Ash and the gang actually managed to get ahead of the Arbo tank and decide to cut it off at a nearby clearing. They quickly set up a makeshift base, don't question it, and Brock comes up with a plan to successfully trap the Arbo tank, as they all dress in military outfits, even Pikachu and the Sentret. The plan was to dig a hole and then fill it with a whole bunch of rocks and water so the tank would get stuck inside of it. Pretty simple. Simple, but hard work. Ash and the gang quickly threw some rocks inside of a hole, and then had their water Pokemon, including Misty's Poliwag and Staryu and Ash's Squirtle, fill up the hole with water. Misty got Psyduck to try and help as well, but Psyduck, being as useless as ever, absolutely refused and just stood there, not even knowing what the fuck was going on. When it finally started to move, Misty thought that it was finally going to do something, but it only just decided to dab its feet in the water and swim around a little bit, despite hating water. With the trap set, the Arbo tank then arrives, so Ash and the gang jump out of the way as the Arbo tank drives into the hole, now stuck. Misty and Ash then jump into the hole and try and get into the tank so that they can retrieve Togepi and the Sentret. However, the only opening hatch that they could currently access due to the tank's current position was only small enough for Pikachu to fit through, so Ash and Misty stayed outside in the hole as Pikachu entered the Arbo tank. Ash and Misty then looked through the window and saw that the sentret inside the tank was currently caught in some wires, and as it started to try and free itself from the wires, this caused the tank to start moving again, since the wires must have been connected to the control panel somehow. So Ash and Misty run out of the hole, not wanting to get run over by the tank, leaving Pikachu trapped inside, unable to get out. Sentret messing with the wires also causes a missile to come out of the Arbo tank's mouth, destroying the rocks in the hole, allowing the Arbo tank to climb out of the water and back onto the road, where it continues driving. Team Rocket then reveal themselves in magician disguises, having caught up to Ash and the gang in the tank. And they proceed to do some simple magic tricks, such as card tricks and tricks where Pidgey appear out of nowhere. And then they reveal their true best trick, which was to make a hole appear out of nowhere, therefore trapping the Arbo tank inside of it yet again. Ash and the gang obviously questioned how the fuck Team Rocket did this, with Team Rocket claiming that since they were literally the best at making holes, even better than fucking Dugtrio, that they could just make a hole at will. Obviously, they didn't do this, they were just trolling with Ash and the gang. They had dug this hole in advance. They probably just covered it with dirt or something so no one would notice. Or maybe it was magic, who knows? Anyways, Team Rocket being Team Rocket, decide that with their Arbo tank now apprehended, they would take the opportunity to steal Pikachu, Sentret, and Togepi. When Meowth jumps in and goes to the control room, he instantly finds not only the Sentret caught in the wires, but Togepi and Pikachu were as well now. Upon seeing Meowth trying to capture him, Pikachu thundershocks Meowth, but this thundershock also shocks the wires that he was trapped in, which causes a technical failure, making the Argo tank bounce out of the hole and down the road on a spring, almost running over several Diglett and Sandshrew in the process. Ash sees this as him and the gang continue to now chase the tank, and remembers that the Pokedex stated that Sentret was capable of sending warnings, so he tells the Sentret to send a warning to all the Pokemon in the area, telling them to evacuate so they didn't get absolutely run over by the Arbo tank. Thankfully, Sentret's message works, and several other Sentret, along with Diglett and Sandshrew, proceed to evacuate. Meanwhile, inside the Arbo tank, as Pikachu, Sentret, and Togepi kept squirming around in the wires, this caused the Arbo tank to go faster. Meowth had given up on trying to capture Sentret, Togepi, and Pikachu at this point, simply just trying to get them out of the wiring so that they wouldn't accidentally drive the cliff into something. Unfortunately, Meowth was too late, as he looked out the window and noticed that the tank was heading straight for a mountain. Fortunately, at the last second, Togepi waved its arms, causing it to use Metronome, which caused it to use Horn Drill somehow, which drilled a hole in the mountain, essentially turning it into a cave that the Arbo tank could pass through. The Arbo tank indeed passes through, and Ash and the gang and Team Rocket soon catch up, with Team Rocket joining along wanting to save their tank from destruction. Brock sets up a makeshift base, and they all, wear military outfits yet again, don't question it, as Brock explains that according to his map, after going straight through the new tunnel that the Arbo tank had created, it had set course for a town, meaning that if the Arbo tank reached the town, then the town would be utterly fucked. He comes up with a plan, instructing Ash to send out his Charizard and have it slow the tank down enough so that they could rescue the Pokemon inside, and then use Flamethrower to destroy it. Jesse and James are obviously against this plan, as it involved their Arbo tank getting destroyed, and they put a lot of time into building it, and money as well, which they had already gone over. However, their complaints are very quickly cut off by Misty, as she yells at them even louder than they were yelling. Meanwhile, in the town that the Arbo tank was heading to, the town's local officer Jenny could hear rumbling, and immediately panicked, knowing that something was likely on its way. Ash then went through with Brock's plan, as he sent out Charizard, and Ash and the gang and Team Rocket followed it on Brock's Onix. Ash orders Charizard to fly ahead of the Arbo tank, which it does, and then tries its best to push it back with all of its strength, going against the motor. Charizard was struggling, so Sentret tried its best to help it, even though it likely wasn't doing much. Inside the Arbo tank, Meowth and Pikachu were doing what they could to try and stop it as well, with Meowth trying to find the brakes. When he found them, however, the controls just snapped off, rendering the brakes useless. Pikachu got angry at this, and released a Thundershock due to his anger, which unfortunately just resulted in the entire control panel then being destroyed, rendering the rest of the controls now useless as well. However, Pikachu's Thundershock actually worked in everyone's favor, as the controls being destroyed resulted in the tank experiencing a mechanical failure, meaning it stopped in its tracks. This allowed Brock to order his Onix to grab the Arbo tank's tail in its mouth and then spin it around. Due to it being spun around, Charizard now had a good angle to burn a hole through the tank, so he proceeded to do so, allowing Pikachu, Togepi, and the young Sentret to escape. Meowth stays in the tank though, hoping that there was some way that he could fix the control panel so that he could salvage the Arbo tank, and make sure that Team Rocket hadn't just wasted a whole bunch of money on a now destroyed machine. But Jesse and James warn him to escape, as due to the control panel being destroyed, it was only a matter of time before the entire Arbo tank exploded, and sure enough, it did, as Jesse and James had run up to it, sending Jesse, James, and Meowth all blasting off. Ash and the gang then watch over the burning remains of the Arbo tank, as the mother Sentret reunites with the baby Sentret, finally revealing to Ash and the gang what the Sentret was looking for when it came up to them. Although the mother Sentret was glad to have its youngling back, it made sure to give it a stern scolding so that the Sentret would never try anything like that again. Misty did the same to Togepi, warning it that she would never let it drive until it was 18. Come on, Misty. Does Togepi even live to be 18? Who knows? The officer Jenny from the nearby town that was in danger then arrived on her motorcycle, having used the tunnel that Togepi created with Metronome to get there. Although she initially came to help with the rumbling that she heard, the tunnel amazed her so much that that was all she could focus on. She was so amazed by the tunnel, since now People could drive to her town from Violet City through the mountain, as opposed to having to go around the mountain, which apparently halved the time. Ash and the gang laugh at themselves, as they realize that Team Rocket was actually responsible for some unintentional good for once, believing the tank to be the sole contributor to the mountain tunnel, unaware that Togepi had actually used its metronome, so Togepi was the one who actually did some good.